it! Stay right there! What are you waiting for? Kill them! Kill them both! No, wait a minute! Is it money you're after? I'll give you as much as you want!
May the saints forgive you, because I won't.
What the fuck is up, Joe? It has been almost 2 years, but it has felt like shorter because we've stayed in touch for all that time. And obviously, I've been a fan of your work for much longer than even the first appearance on my show. And I'm really excited. And I want to shout out right at the front, just because I really like Robert. And I think I would consider him a friend to me and a friend to the show. And I know he's a friend to you. So shout out Robert Stark, episode 69, Cosmoplatonism.
Right. Well, Robert was just over for the first time in New York City in his life, and he came over to the Philadelphia airport, and I picked him up, and he spent a week over on the East Coast, and we attended a new Ritual Press, that's Matt Pegas's, alt-lit, party house with Dan Baltic and other people in person, Love from Break the Rules. We had that little thing going on. That was in June. Yeah. And, it's me and Robert are very close. I mean, he's now, the problem is he's in Santa Barbara. I was in Frisco for 4 years, so I'm kind of now all over the place in Busan, Korea, or just Philadelphia or New York. I'm trying to figure things out. Oddly enough, I was in Burbank, California again this year for another job, but it's just at this current moment in time in the economy, I'm everywhere. But yeah, Robert Stark. I don't know. We haven't recorded a podcast in forever because me and Robert just are friends now, and we just talk whatever. But yeah, on this show, I think it was 2024 when I came on. I think it was last year, almost 2 years, I think.
Well, Joe, it was kind of cool because you were kind of considered to be very cool, edgy, transgressive, all the things that I know you like. And a lot of the podcasters who followed me were like, you fuck with Joe? And I was like, yeah, of course I fuck with Joe. I'm like, I'm Hoppa. It's like, totally makes sense. And I've peripherally known of him for a long time. And I've always thought he's fucking cool. And we have a lot of the same cultural references and touchstones. And so after you came on my show, I noticed a few months later, some of those other podcasters were kind of like asking, oh, let's have Joe on. So I was happy that, I get to be a little avant-garde and a little of the first.
Well, my DMs are open, so I don't, you'd be surprised in DMs too, because if people say, oh, that guy, he's weird, though I don't DM him or I don't get to the primary source. So I don't know. I mean, who's to say who knows who anymore? But yeah, it's very interesting on the X sphere anymore. I don't think Twitter's real. It's now just X and this kind of silo universe we're in, and things have gotten way worse in psychological operations. That's all I'm going to say.
It is a carnal ground. I mean, Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it, it's absolutely a carnal ground. It's the ghost worlds. Everyone in it is a bit of a hungry ghost for different things, obviously. It can feed their desires in different ways. And I 100% agree. I just wanted to say, I think it was cool, Joe, that you came on my show, sort of like, not a first, but definitely like, like I'm trying to not break into like alt lit or anything like that, but I have had alt lit people ask to come on my show now. And I just feel like it kind of broke through the gateway, at least the first gate, when you came on, simply because you were already part of it. You are an author, and you have like a huge body of internet work as well as real life work. So thank you so much, Joe. I really appreciate it, and I'm really looking forward to this conversation.
But I'll tell you this, I was never on a label, never on a publishing company. As weird as that sounds, I don't know if it's circumstance or just as much as I would like to be on a label, it never really happened. And I think in this day and age, you really have to do everything yourself, even though in the age of AI, where you could literally get a robot and do things. It's very strange. I think internet art is rapidly changing, and my close friends just all do video art or, internet art and things like that. So I don't know. I even think the term alt-lit is kind of a weird term, because it's like there's post-alt-right, Groypers, alt-lit, X in the same silo, but then it's like, do these people, is everything the same thing as, Basil would say, the media market literate thing? Huge fan of Basil, but it's just, I really can't say, I don't like being fit in boxes. I just have associates, it's like, I really like what the Warrior Philosopher is doing. And, he just had a show on today with Jason Drajani. And I remember...
Oh, he had another episode with Jason?
Yeah.
I've been trying to get Jason on my show for a while. But he, I think the Vajrayana bro, the tantric stuff, I think it kind of freaks him out, if I'm being honest.
No, it's funny because I took it for granted, when I would go Countercurrents in New York, he would be the headline speaker, and then Emily Eucas would be opening up for him, and I didn't think nothing of it. And he's just... I see everything change where it's like, well, I like that the Warrior Philosopher is kind of really close with him. And for a bit, he was saying he was an Asian Aryan. And I was like, well, Godspeed, because it's not my word. It's whatever you make of it. It's very much of a situationist thing. I don't even know if it's because in this, on X, it's not Twitter of 10 years ago. It's basically owned by Elon Musk. It is some weird Republican deep state thing that basically uses, kind of rage bait, paranoid, hysterical, it sounds like it's white nationalist. It looks like it's white nationalist, but it's rather this kind of Trojan or bread and circus thing to push certain agendas or something, when it's really got magnified. And it's really weird what's going on X. It's hard to say if this is an embodiment of culture war Trotskyism, or we're in a hall of mirrors, and we really are we can't really like do microblogging anymore. I don't think the answer is blue sky. I think that is a horrible, don't ever do blue sky. But what I am saying is that we don't have ownership over our data anymore, or what we're writing. Like, it's hard to imagine that 10, 20 years ago, people had their own .coms and their own websites. And I think we've lost that, because instead of uploading your music on mp3.com or your own website, you went over to MySpace Music, which then became Bandcamp, which then became Instagram, which is now your Mark Zuckerberg is your landlord. And it's at that point where we're seeing this kind of divide frenzy where nobody can really, everybody's relying on these free platforms, and then your landlord will erase you out of hate speech or some weird law, or you'll get buried in algorithm, or they'll delete your data. So I'm kind of at that turn where eventually, I think maybe next year, probably in January, I would like to start my own website with a GitHub and a .com. I mean, there's already pilleater.com, but that's technically a Substack, which is a different version of WordPress that offers everything for the normative audience. But I'm talking about like HTML. And so my good friend Fodcam, who I know in person, he worked for, Adult Swim and $1 Million Extreme. He bought AsianArianism.com again. And he says, listen, I want to make this site way better. He owns a website called 3D Testosterone. It's a fantastic website. it's kind of he kind of was a precursor to the internet Christianity Milady people, and he's never cited. People know his work. In fact, there's a weird theory that Liminal Spaces, very first video, Fodcam recorded that in his backyard, and he showed me in person, and he showed the date, and I was like, wow. So Fodcam pretty much invented liminal spaces, and now everybody's saying that. I guess to make a long story short, that's kind of where meme culture is going, where we make things and we don't know who the original guy made it is, and we start to realize we're in a really small universe where we are losing meme culture because it becomes this giant whisper down the lane without citation, which is a cool thing. And I think that's the integrity of being on the internet. But sometimes people get lost in that X, Instagram, high school clique and not understanding, what the intention was of the art. And I'm seeing that a lot now. I think having your own website kind of retain your brand and things like that. And that's kind of something I'm slowly coming to realize, especially that you or me as a person are virtual avatars on the internet, and we could very well be having weird parasocial relationships with people all over the globe, and we don't even know.
Well, that is obviously true, because I do know people from all over the globe now. I mean, I've always been a bit of a transnational in a way, not like an elite class or anything, but just simply because of my background. But I think that, and obviously multicultural Canada is just the way it is. It's been that way since the, mid 80s. So that's absolutely true. But you touched on it the whole time. Everything that you said, I think, was talking about like the ownership of words, the ownership of, even if that's even not even possible, maybe that's not even possible. But as you are a coiner of words, Joe, and as I am a coiner of words, that one of those words has been appropriated by the Milady crowd, Hapaboria, which is my word. But I did give that kid shit. I'm just gonna cop to it right now. Like the warrior poet guy, he did use it once, and I was like, why the fuck are you using it? And it's not because I think it's the only can come from me, or I'm the only one who can say it, or like bring it into reality or breathe it into reality. I don't. But I like what you said. There's a specific kind of socio-political, and we'll call it mythological, or maybe it's mythopoetic context to which that, at least the way I envision that word, it exists. Just like how Asian Aryanism also has those kind of undertones of like a mythopoetic kind of, well, we talked about this in your first episode, like syncretic kind of like recreation, but also like something new.
Well, I think it's an old word. I think it's an outdated word, because it's kind of like if you look at Wojaks and then you remember the Foo guy, the Rage guy, it evolved. It took a decade. I think back then when I had AsianArianism.com in 2016, the 4chaners and some of the alt-right people weren't ready for it. And it's cool to go to the Wayback Machine, look at the data, look what people were saying, things like the anime rights or something, or even if it doesn't have to be right-wing, and how now you go on X and it's literally algorithm boosted. White people are becoming Chinese. This is the future. White guys that like China based. And it's just like, and then and everything seems to be about Japan this, Japan that. It's a very strange thing going on. It's very Asian centric. And I think the word Aryanism is funny because it offends girls. And I've had people back, how could you say that? That's like being a serial killer or something. But now it's like, now everybody's an Aryan. I came across a weird account where it's like Indian men got to get with white women. It's our Aryan roots.
As Aryans, yeah, the Indians love that. That's their fave.
Back then, but I think today, when push comes to shove, you don't use the blunt words or say, "Oh, remember this." You just let it be. You let it morph into something, and I think that's the enjoyable part of the memic culture and seeing what you could throw in the ether. And you might want to remind people, but at the same time, as the artist, you're just like, well, whatever. It's your own child. Your child now 10 years old. He has a consciousness, there's no ownership over everything. Life's a gift, not a privilege.
I agree with you, Joe. Just for the record, I agree with you, and I also think it's like it's very like punk. It's like very much our generation, right? Like we did like mimetic magic is kind of like the, it's like the single word, the solitary word, mimetic easing. Like it's like in the ether. It kind of belongs to someone. Kind of has qualities. Maybe philosophical qualities, we'll call it. But you're right, it exists kind of also by itself and also in people's perception. So it is kind of like concrete poetry in a way, to have a word that sort of is like indie, underground, or metamagical, we'll call it. So I agree. There has to be like a punk ethos where you're like, okay, I'm letting it go. I'm letting it be. People are going to take it. It's outside of my control. It's outside of my sphere of influence. And I do get that. I really do get that. But I'm not finished with the word. And I think that this is the difference between like Asianarianism and like Hyperborea. It's that there really is no difference, like besides the presentation. But I'm not fully finished fleshing out what Hyperborea is yet. But when I do, I will say it is exactly like Asianarianism, and if Jason Giorgiani wants to use it,
well, again, going back to Warrior Philosopher, we were at a Rachel Haywire event, and when he went up, he was like, "I love Pilleater and all his work and all, and I think Asianarianism is the future." And for whatever word he's using now, and I'm like, well, it's not trademarked. Anybody can really use it. And here's the thing. It's just like if you go on Twitter and you're like, well, the two words, ethno-nationalism and multipolarity pretty much, mean the same thing. Within the nationalist circles, they're like, well, nationalism is ethno-nationalism. It's nationalism for all people. And then multipolarity means, well, there's no more Western power. Everyone is a superpower because they have their own nationalisms. And so it's like two different market audiences, but you're talking about the same thing. And that's how I feel about things now, is that you kind of psyop people, if you want to say that. And it's like, is it meme magic, or is it now we are master rhetorical English language users tricking people to do one thing for another? And the way you present your words in English and how you think is how you change people's minds. And I think that's the weird part of it all. And I'm starting to see how things today where, how quickly, and I was talking to this, my friend Neurojack, how today, if the argument, if X is, appealing that it's white nationalist, believes in race, white people are great and all that, it assumes that, National Socialism is the answer. So if everybody has all these arguments, against anti-whiteness, we need ethno-nationalism, racialist this, then liberals can't debunk that because it becomes such a norm. So the only way you can debunk a person is by calling them a pedophile. And so this is kind of like satanic panic. Back in the 80s.
It's directly linked. The two words are even directly linked, excuse me.
So, but it's like, I was talking about this with Shane Bugby, another friend. He's in Chicago. We meet up, we talk a lot. And he was just in New York recently for a zine release in Williamsburg. And he's a Satanist, but he said, listen,
I'm cool
I
with
remember
lots of people I've had many people, Setians, on the show. I have a co-host who's a Setian, and I'm cool with all that shit. Like, I'm cool with it because I understand it. I don't take it to be like the normies take it. And but I also think Left Hand Path is interesting. But I'm not endorsing or condemning anything. I'm just stating my position for the show.
No, Shane's like a classical Satanist. He's seen all of it. He's seen everything grow. But, we have these talks, and Shane said, I remember there was satanic panic, and this was in the 80s. Basically, it was remotely all Christian, and that if it was a serial killer or someone bad or even someone who was politically incorrect, they must have been a Satanist. They must be worshiping the devil. It sounds so absurd, but, Chip Smith of Nine Banded Books, he put out this, volume called Satanic Panic about listing all these examples how Satanic Panic irrationally influenced conservative politics and things like that. Now, there's a second phase after Satanic Panic, and that was Nazi Panic, and that was in the 90s and 2000s. It was kind of like the Dead Kennedy song, Nazi punks fuck off, that all of a sudden there was this upsurge of so-called Nazi punks without really, it wasn't like Screwdriver or No Remorse or like actual neo-Nazi bands. They were kind of just figments of the imagination. And so for at least 20 years after Satanic Panic, if you couldn't prove that they were worshiping the devil, then they must be worshiping Hitler. And that the problem is that, supposedly capitalism is just fascism and decay. Everything is Nazi. And it literally became the whole thing. Everything I don't like is Hitler. And I think that Gen X thing was what Elon Musk went through. Now he's like the most richest man in the world. He buys X. You see people like Greg Johnson, who, survived academia in the 90s and 2000, and their whole career is reversing that and saying it's okay to be a white nationalist, to be racially aware. And there's not that anything wrong with National Socialism. Hitler was just a statesman. And I think you can explain that with millennial woes market or whatever. That's what they are. They're basically, racial nationalists and Nat Silk guys. And I was sympathetic to that because a lot of them came from industrial music and Marshall Industrial. I love industrial. And there's no denying that, some of that post-krautrock thing or Leibach or Rammstein was impartial, influenced by totalitarian imagery and things like that. But I think now that that's so mainstream and everybody has played the part of Nazi panic, it no longer works. It's kind of like, you've now have evidence that we are in a very weird CIA, everything I don't like is Hitler. Now that you don't have arguments to debunk what is National Socialist or those totalitarian things, we're going through pedophile panic. And I just wanted to end this real quick and say, if you go on search on X right now to discredit people like Nick Fuentes, you don't discredit them because they're irrational in their politics or argument, because you can't debunk National Socialism because everyone knows it's common sense now. You say he rapes kids, or he there's no evidence of him raping a child, but it's this assumption that it's the thought that matters or his desires are unethical. I think that's very dangerous to have this pedophile hysteria going on. And I'm now seeing it that whenever you are politically incorrect or held views which are anti-liberal, against the liberal status quo, it's no longer that you're a Satanist, because Satanism is now a part of the construct, as Shane Bugbee knows, or it's not that you're a Nazi. Doesn't really work when Trump's in power and everyone on X is sympathetic to it. It now must mean that it doesn't matter if you believe in National Socialism. You must be a pedophile. And then it's like, well, where's the evidence? Oh, he was sharing a video. Oh, he likes the art of Trevor Brown. Oh, he likes Peter Sotos. And it doesn't explain why people read William Burroughs or Dennis Cooper, who, Dennis Cooper being a gay writer, and, his novel like The Sluts or the George Miles Cycle, talking about rape and abuse and what's it mean to be a gay man in those situations. That doesn't mean it's pedophilia. It just talks about how abuse creates the queer condition. And so I think that's what's happening right now, is that we can't even be punk anymore because there's this now weird Epstein accusation that all the elites are pedophiles and we're all in a cabal of possibly being members of NAMBLA, which is absurd. And I've now understanding this because I've had people say pilleater's a pedophile. Right? That it doesn't make any sense whatsoever, because I'm a family man and I do my own thing, and I'm there's nothing wrong with me. I'm just a very smart intellectual from upper middle class family. I don't know why they would be saying that, but they will say it because it's this weird Foucaultian power dynamic, just because bad people think bad thoughts, which is absurd because liberalism believes in the free will of all possible thoughts. So now when you have a society that's in favor of transhumanism and men becoming women or acceptance of gay culture. Hey, they can't be thinking they want to be kids or going into a woman's bathroom. That's not pedophilia. Pedophilia must mean abuse, or like even the notion of liking a woman who's thin and pretty. That's now somehow pedophilia or something, in that you want to abuse and take away or something. And it's going to an absurd line. But yeah, to make a long story short, I've been seeing this all over X, and from both the left and right.
Well, misapplication of a word. It's very Klipothic. I know I'm getting a little Kabbalistic for you. I know that you get it, Joe, but I'm going to go a little.
Go on.
But it is very Klipothic. And it's very, it's a specific klipa, actually. It's the klipa of Gevurah. It's the accusation of something you yourself perhaps are guilty of, meaning that people who do have interesting, perhaps peculiar flags in their bios will call other people, pedos or whatever. But it's like, okay, as you said, Joe, I'm also like I've described myself as like a third culture, multi-culti, Asian arfag, which is obviously true. But it's not about engaging with like sick ideas. It's about just engaging with your own mind, and then also like literature and the culture as it presents itself, and sort of like deconstructing it and understanding it perhaps more rigorously. It's not about endorsing. Right. So for me, I just try and take things very conceptually, which is, I understand, is an imperfect hermeneutic for many, the non-shape rotators out there. But for certainly the parapolitical community, not that parapolitics is wrong. This is what I've sort of come into realization of. Parapolitics isn't totally wrong. There is a deep political layer to everything that happens that we don't see, that if you just want to call it bureaucratic or just mean it in the Peter Dale Scott way, who's like a big libtard, that's fine. I think that there's an element of that's true. Or if you want to call it deep state, whatever. But I also think that like the sort of culture that is built around parapolitics online, especially because on Blue Sky, they will do this too. Any kind of age discourse, any kind of like, and I just want to say for the record, like Joe has kids. Like I forgot how many you have, Joe. I know you had a baby the last time we spoke. I apologize. But yeah, like I only date people my own age, just for the record, just be very clear about it. Like very close to my own age. And so like plus minus 5 years max. And so for me, I just see it. I see it so clearly that people love this label, that are associated with parapolitics, that will call everybody it, that will say anyone associated with anyone a problematic, and like especially the Epstein stuff. Like, let's be honest, like that's not even the word, that's not even the meaning of the word that as they're calling it. So the words clearly have no meaning. So Wittgenstein obviously right about everything. Just burn the books, I guess. Weimar Solutions. But really, the parapolitical people on Twitter carry a lot of responsibility on this, but I don't think it's just them, because I think it's a silo, as you said, that has been created to capture their narrative imaginary and sort of put them into a kind of ideological box, an ideological klipa. And I also think that this is part of mimetic magic more broadly. Like maybe this is the meta magic of mimetic magic, is that they will use things like the dialectical sort of rhetoric to push people into specific silos, and then they will reverse the polarity. So then like what becomes good becomes bad, and what becomes bad becomes culture. And so it becomes like very decoherent. People don't know what the fuck's going on. Like, because we saw this, like you saw, Joe, you were online for this exact time. I remember I would log on, it'd be like, your blue PFP, I'd see a turquoise, sorry, not blue, turquoise. But so that's what it is. It is like the parapolitics broke up, like the kind of right and the left parapolitics scene. They kind of splintered into a million pieces. You have the Dave McGowan left-wing crowd who's like very like magic's not real. But then all these people are Satanists. And then if you're a Satanist, you must obviously be a pedo. And it's like, I really think you're missing the point. And then you have all these right-wing MAGA people who are clearly very theosophically or Scientologically or Mormon, like Enochian inclined. We'll call them Enochian care. And they are talking about like Christ consciousness and like all this stuff. So very magic, kind of like consciousness magic. But then they'll say everything else is satanic. It's all Luciferian. You guys are fucking Luciferian. You guys are the ones perpetuating this kind of like, we're truthers and we're looking for the truth. And you don't even know what that is. You don't even know what the contour of that looks like. So all that being said, I'm sorry, Joe, I kind of meandered, but
no, it's always good because I learned from it. I mean, I just want to say, you know, what I note about 2025 and this year in review for X. Again, I don't try to call it Twitter anymore because it's not even Twitter. I think Twitter's long gone dead. It's the spirit of X now. It's a black color with a weird... I would put it this way. X is the Republican faction of the deep state, and Instagram is the Democrat faction of the deep state. They're both the same family. It's just that how do you divvy up the generations? If millennials are Republican leaning, they're on X. If they're Democrat leaning, they're on Instagram. And then Zoomers are on TikTok, pretty much. But yet they're all silos, and people have lost their internet independence. Kind of brings back
internet sovereignty.
Right.
So
Eric
funny.
S. Raymond. That's right. So Eric S. Raymond, you know, he wrote a book called The Cathedral and the Bazaar. And he said that, you know, when he invented the internet and helped create some of that and create a lot of open source platforming, he described that the internet might succumb to a world of the cathedral where all politics, ideology, and how everything should operate is like a church, and that the bazaar, free markets, is where people are liberated. This is where Curvis Yarvin got the word, you know, cathedral from, Eric S. Raymond and Nick Land. And they commonly nonchalantly go, yeah, that's a word Eric made up. And again, goes back, Asian Aryanism or half of Orion. It happens. It's just open source. But everyone knows it was Eric S. Raymond who was kind of the early start of intellectual dark web. But it's important because, you know, if you go on X, you don't really have that much freedom when you have algorithms going against you. Your friends like your own tweets that get 5. In fact, I did a little experiment. There was a video about a month ago that was being shared of an Indian guy flashing his, you know, penis to some white woman Taurus. And I just retweeted it and took some gang stalkers, you know, tweet that said something about white women. I didn't think it would blow up. I just wanted to keep a note to myself because I have a community archive that naturally mirrors and saves my tweets. And then it blew up and it got 59,000 likes. And then all of a sudden, you know, 300 people started following me. And then the gang stalkers come in and say, well, plagiarist, he stole it. And I'm like, well, it's slop, right? I mean, the people who... I kind of have this theory now, and I don't think it's theory. I think this is true. There's Twitter accounts under 100 followers with scannable handle names, and immediately they close their DM and they say kind of the normative party lines, or they say something because I think they're doing it to get a reaction out of you to then screen cap what you write and then report it back to a group chat. And these group chats, I'm just going to say it out loud, they're ran by people like Zoltanis and Thomas777 and kind of the weird dark markets that Basil talks about. And this stuff wasn't big a decade ago, but I think that dark marketing really started post Discord around 2020, and that's where it gets connected with Dime Square and some of these liberal elites that pretend they're anti-liberal only then to push a certain agenda to sell things. And you know, it's the same thing. It's kind of like the Yankee and the Cowboy War. There's the transatlantic elite and the Sunbelt elite. The Sunbelt elite being the Sam Hyde party, and the transatlantic being that of the old democratic world of Gen Xers who don't know what's going on, but they work together because the Dems have to tell you to read Compact magazine to get, you know, American Renaissance / countercurrents viewpoints digested for you. And it's crazy how you could just, you know, put a skateboard on and, be a guy and be like, hello, fellow kids. And then or reading safety propaganda or something like that. And, but Philip Best of White House supported it, guys. And it's not some proxy war to support a Republican cause. And it is. And that's the funny part. And that's why the gang stalkers or Indians or CIA agents, it does sound like a Philip K. Dick novel, and it is. They are just here to report you and put you in the Hall of Mirrors. So you slip up and you say something, and then you could have police knocking on your door or whatever used against you out of ideological reasons. But at the same time, I enjoy it because I just feel like if that's the case, you might as well be an internet prankster in the tradition of ytimnd.com or eBomb's world or the something awful ideals and fight what you have to say. But again, just saying on the words being using, they want to make sure they think you're stupid and they think you're a part of the masses of stupid people, because smart people, they're bigger than that. It's like the algorithms support when you're say the smart things or not. And even if I have to say it, I'll use my own terminologies and say, like, listen, one of my favorite things to do is, it's not worth to get in arguments with these people anymore on X. So if you're going to be downplayed, you might as well go on Jackson Hinkle's post and be like, oh, Eurasian futurism, anime realism, and these terms we make up, and then relink back to your blog. And sometimes it does work, but it's worth to have an argument if your letters are saved. And it's like going back on the pedophile thing. It's just that the reason why I'm so cautious and like now understanding the psychological warfare behind it is that it makes sure to shut down our arguments for Eurasianism. It's like this. All I can have to do is play the word game and say, listen, Asian sexuality is not homosexuality, bestiality, or pedophilia. Again, Asian sexuality is not homosexuality, bestiality, or pedophilia. There's people like Tim Rogers Jr. or Jamie Stewart of Juju that, those Gen Xers, they continue to say, well, no, it is a type of queer culture. Just I like Asian women like I like men. Well, that's a little disrespectful because you're conflating the androphilic attitude with the feminine ideal. And that's why the pedophile accusation comes in, like Dennis Cooper says. And listen, there's already, intellectuals in those spheres like Thomas Spink, who his whole life was, intellectualizing bestiality because he was a zoophiliac. He did have sex with animals. And he still has a brand where there's a podcast called Zooier Than Thou that talks about the zoosexual lifestyle, and even had a controversial episode of Zoo Sadism.
I just want to pause you, Joe. I'm sorry. I think this is a really interesting point. I know this is sounds a little crazy, especially for the show, which is mostly a magic show, but I actually think it's really important what you're saying, because there's an idea that I talk about, which is of like geo-ontological relations, which I'm lifting out of indigenous feminism. So very leftist kind of framing of kinship relations. But I don't take it in a leftist way. Now, what does this have to do with zoophilia? There are scholars in that kind of indigenous feminist standpoint epistemology that do personally believe. I do not personally believe this. Like, be very clear. I'm not condoning this. I'm against it 100%. I think it's gross, and I think it's very weird and very paraphilia, and I'm not comfortable with it at all. But they are actually talking about this. But then you come into ideas of free agency, consent, and like, are we the exact same thing as animals? So obviously I'm a Buddhist, so I disagree. I disagree with all those sort of points they make. But for them, it seems to be a kind of return, with a V, obviously, to a kind of primordial or a kind of like they would call it a decolonial state or a pre-colonial state, maybe, where you could have closer kinship relations with animals, which obviously is, I don't know, it just seems like almost like transgressive in its ideological form, for the sake of transgressivity, it doesn't actually feel like most people, this is not something pragmatic that you could like roll out to people and be like, this is okay. But at the same time, I'm saying that there is an increase of awareness, like just the general awareness, especially for people on Twitter who like to consider themselves high IQ or at least above midwit status, we'll say. And they all of them, like every single person on Twitter, like they know what a furry is, they know what like all this shit, like all the sort of like subcultural and I don't know, like artifacts of that sort of I'm not trying to call it a kink. It's not really kink, but it's like that, whatever that is. So they know the contours and the periphery of it. So I do think it's interesting how those things get generated. But as I always say, like we don't have to take them in the sicko way. You can just take it as like, yeah, actually we should pay attention to like the biome that we live in, the like relationalities that we have with the land and with like the sort of like the spiritual forces, but those also arise maybe number one in our own mind. So I would say that those are kind of like impulses or inclinations that maybe you would go through in spiritual experiences. Like I'm talking more like hardcore. I'm not talking about just like Sephirotic Merkaba journey. I'm talking about like maybe if you were like like an Ann Prim shaman and you were out there in the wilderness for like 49 days, we'll give it a magic number. And you were kind of going through, maybe it's things that you would think about, maybe it's visions that you would see, but it's not necessarily the material grounds to go enact those things. So I think that has a lot to that's for me, Joe, personally. I think that has a lot to do with narrative discourse and what things are considered acceptable, because what things are considered acceptable in your mind, do you not have sovereignty over your own mind? That is like internet sovereignty, right? We don't really have internet sovereignty.
Well, right? I just believe in ethic. I'm virtue, and I believe in virtue ethics. And that's for a long time. I say I believe in charms and showing that. That's why recently I say I'm straight edge, is because that's a part of the tradition to put down ethics. It's not liberalism per se. It's more like, you should know what right and wrong is. You can know these things, but that's what I was saying. It's like, if you believe the elites are all pedophiles, then you're believing a certain morality of the world that, it's evil people in power and they all must be, an Alex Jones vampiric pedophile elites. And it's not that they care about the action, it's rather the unethical thought. They don't understand where. I'm gonna make a weird citation. It's like Andrew Tate in his one video that got him popular, and Andrew Tate said, I watch really violent videos and you think I'm some sick freak, but actually imagine if you're sitting in Paris one day and terrorists come in with guns. If someone shoots the guy next to me, I'm like, oh, see that coming, I'll kill them because I have a violent mentality for the sake of people. And there's some truth to that. All boxers and fighters feel that way of the world. And that's what the liberal prides itself on free will and all possible worlds and wherever the rhinestone goes. But it just can't imagine if you think unethical thoughts as the crime. And that's exactly what George Orwell wrote, is that when you think of something, it's now criminal. But again, as long as we can think and be philosophical and understand ethics and have standards and be critical, then that's the important part. But whatchamacallit, I just wanted to say, going back on that thought, I just wanted to say real quick that, the word Asian sexuality, even though I'm pushing that as well, because it follows the liberal framework, I wouldn't say it's a paraphilia. Homosexuality, bestiality, and pedophilia are paraphilias defined on Wikipedia, and paraphilias are sexual interests that don't reproduce. Asian sexuality, you have your Asian child and you have family. So that's pretty much normal. If you throw a white person in Korea or North Korea and they grow up thinking, I speak and, use Korean or speak, read, and write Korean, I see myself as a North Korean, I love Kim Jong-un, therefore, this is normal. I am a Korean person. So it's language is a category of the mind, and it's socially constructs the individual to belong to that. Now that's normal. So I wouldn't say it's a paraphilia. It's only the orientation now is about desire. And I think desire is hated by our liberal system, because if you had true desires, you would destroy the equity and egalitarianism of that some desires are more equal than others in a weird way.
Well, some desires are. I mean, I'm comfortable saying that, Joe.
Well, it's just like I'm being facetious, like it's a George Orwell thing.
I know.
But,
I'm just pausing. I'm just,
it's just like if I was to tell people, what is the subculture behind things? You're talking about subculture, and I remember in graduate school, I read Dick Hebdige, an English guy. He writes about, why subculture matters over culture. If you have a culture that's liberal and capitalist, then you get subcultures that break down but all follow the main big C culture, and these subcultures are kind of futile, and they were countercultures, but subcultures are the conformist ideals. So that's why subcultures are important, because everybody in their Twitter bio seems to be a pro North Korean national Bolshevist, or I'm a nationalist. But it's like that one meme with the anime girl. I may be racist, but what you said was mean. It's as if we are turning everyone into liberals that thinks they can. I would say it's a Gabriel Rockhill position of they're turning everyone bourgeois, if you want to say it that way. And this is why people got really upset over certain particular words, where you kind of create glitches within the system to normalize things. Minor attracted person. That means you're attracted to minors, but it uses that politically correct, soft message as if the user is sincere with their convictions, right? And
that's the problem. That's exactly you're hitting it, Joe. Sorry to interrupt you, but that's the sincerity and the Zoomer sincerity push. Be yourself. Be a performer. Be an influencer. Go on TikTok. Show your real, true self.
But it's gonna break down.
That's right. Well, that's the whole thing. And so, but they're co-creative. What you're saying about the word of soft liberalism and also the identity liberalism of Zoomers, they're co-creative. They push them in. That's another way to push people into silos, into categories that they don't necessarily belong in, or as we've seen with certain kinds of gender ideologies. Look, people can go live how they fucking want to live as long as I don't have to pay for it. I've been very clear about this my whole life. But the problem with it is became a mimetic contagion. It really did, regardless of how people feel about that sort of explanation now. It was very clear. You can look at, there was a clear Tumblr trajectory into, they were testing it. Someone was. People, even if it was the community itself. They were kind of testing to see how far they could push the boundaries in a sort of more mainstream, quote unquote, but obviously the internet is also subcultural. It's also somewhat underground. Tumblr at that time, 2014, was very underground.
Right. I mean, the funny part is that I think liberalism falls on itself when we assume that all the Tumblrites and interesting niche subcultures have to be accepted in the liberal moral frame as citizens of the G7 liberal capitalist project. I'll probably change the subject here and think about how, because I'm interested in these things and I've been making memes forever and having a normal TikTok or, whatever internet presence, indoor jokes then become memes. And earlier this year, I made a joke about Save Sleazy, which was, well, basically, I was watching Shredded Nerd, and he was talking about the performative male, and he said the word, but then somebody else I knew in person said the word too, and I just made a joke about it, and then I guess it got 1 million views on TikTok, and then people were copying and pasting it on Instagram, and I have zero presence on Instagram. I only have a little public account with 200 followers, but only then when they heard my voice. And I was getting pictures of Curtis Connor, and I didn't even who care of Curtis Connor. I just took the pictures from Shredded Nerd's video and just redid it and just put it out there. And then I was like, well, this is just stuff white people like. This is what Christian Lander already wrote in 2008. And then all of a sudden friends were saying, no, can you make a video like this? Like, none of the memes I make are original, because just like how you can copy and paste on X, well, people were just DMing me, my friends being like, no, I got a script. Can you just like do these and get these pictures? And guess what? On TikTok, there is the auto cut function, and you just do that, and you get 6 pictures and 7 pictures and use the most public domain. And then you don't use an AI voice. You just voice over it and have the text follow it. And I guess people love that soon enough. And then when you actually had control over that, then people want to make it a storyline and all this stuff. You know, and just going back on us, people don't believe you and me know these esoteric topics. Like, they get kind of scared that we're talking about controversial topics like we're doing right now. And yet, if I told someone in a meme-friendly style, you know, John lives in Astoria, Queens, and his favorite philosopher is Peter Singer. Whoa, based. How did he know that? It's not that I know that. It's that that's what's going on right now. And I think that's the funny part with meme culture, is that it's true. It's not a fantasy. This is like what's actually going on right now. And, you know, people use these, you know, weird words, elite ball knowledge. I don't think it's elite ball knowledge if it's out and open and people are doing these things. And it's so funny that if you know certain things, you must be evil and a bad person. And I think this is the weird part where, you know, I was thinking of Max Weber. The power knowledge games is that the elites know certain things, how the world works. And if the common man knows it, he immediately gets thrown out. Or, you know, they try to test and see what's happening. And so how could me, just a normal guy or whatever, who knows, like us, we're both affluent, whatever, how could you know all these things and make funny videos? That's the scary part. And it's like, it's not scary at all. This is just like what people think. It's a form of pretentiousness, but also a problem, because so many of these people want to say that they're nationalists in their bios and they have sex with animals.
Like, let's be honest, as we spoke pre-recording, the whole internet is a LARP. I think you even mentioned it in this recording. All identities are essentially bullshit online.
Correct.
If you cannot, as you're saying, you could just be a IG, I call it IG AI slop, Instagram influencer. That is my experience on Instagram, not my experiences and not my persona. But I follow a lot of podcasters, a lot. Like, most of my Instagram account is mostly following other podcasters, particularly in the occult sphere, some in the truth sphere that are doing somewhat interesting things. But for sure, the whole thing, even with magic, this is the same. Occult people are definitely not free of the klipas. They have not broken free of the tunnels of Set at all in the terms of identity. They have pronouns. And like, it is what it is. But even like they'll say like left-hand path, Satanist, like anti-cosmic, and that's fine. You're just ideologically identifying yourself in like what niche category you fall into. But even in that is just a LARP. Like, the whole internet is We Was Kang's 3.0 right now.
It's getting crazy.
It's
like,
getting really crazy. I mean, that's the problem. That's the problem.
And we should be studying it.
Well, that's the whole thing, is that you are an internet anthropologist or an internet ethnographer looking at the way mimetic culture affects real culture. And because we know that it does, you can make many people have made the clear argument that is what won the 2016 election, was mimetic magic. I would be very comfortable in co-signing, at least partly, that there are groups of magicians, that there are people thinking in more metaphysical ways. That doesn't mean woo-woo candles in a basement and like sicko shit.
It's the CIA and MK Ultra.
Well, Joe, you know this. I'm asking you, I know you'll know this, but who runs the Internet Archive? Who runs the CIA archive with all the fucking memoirs, with all the chaos magic books that you could possibly, like a young mage cell like myself, could possibly want?
I've been to the headquarters too. Yep, I've been to the actual headquarters to drop off data in person in San Francisco, and it's pretty. I'll be honest with you, people don't utilize it enough. There are data from 2004, 2003 uploaded online and never taken off, and it's the best platform to upload your data on. And no surprise, this is why the private corporations want to go against Internet Archive, because all it takes is a single search to find very offensive, contradictory information or media, and it's there, and they never take it down. And that's a good thing. And I think it's kind of the last thing before having your own internet server, paying once a month. It's free, and people, or it's like this, I've been DJing for, college radio recently, and there's these fake silo platforms where they're treating everything like it's LinkedIn. DJs never had a resume, and they're like, well, if you want to be a DJ, have a Mixcloud. What the hell's a Mixcloud? Well, it's just a service that uploads audio like SoundCloud, and you pay $120 a year to upload your DJ mixes, and they're going to take it down if you don't pay $120 next year. I'm like, well, isn't there the Internet Archive or your own website or like YouTube? And guess what? Those are free alternatives. And yet there's this white collar managerial class saying, I legitimately need to be a DJ if I pay for NTS or a Mixcloud. And I'm like, well, that's not Carl Cox or Frankie Knuckles never did that. And there's a very performative, fake, white-collar LinkedIn ideal of the world that late millennials and Zoomers think it is. And this is why I'm a proponent of Linux and open source, is that everything is free and in front of us, but we're not utilizing saving data or telling, because algorithms, this is internet warfare going on. It's literally this weird PKD revisionist history going against us. For even this is dark data, as we have this hour of audio that, what if somebody in the future, 20 years from now, in 2045, hears this on this particular date at the end of 2025? What are they going to make it in their research? What was really going on?
Well, this is a great point, Joe, is that maybe I'm going to ask you a question. I'm going to phrase it as it doesn't have to be rhetorical. You can answer it or not. It's totally up to you. So I was a young teenage anarchist baby, and I think that perhaps there was inclinations or impulses that were correct. And I'm not speaking for anyone else or anyone associated with me or anything like that, but I do know privately that there are people who have agreed with me. That perhaps like there are structural forces in place to create this kind of white collar LinkedInification of the internet in toto. And it's interesting because a lot of millennials, a lot of people in the alt-lit community, in fact, are actually like work labor jobs, like work more blue collar jobs, or they piecemeal sort of white collar work together. And it's like, that's how they kind of like make a living, which is very millennial, of course. But I also think it is like speaks to their kind of aspiration culture. Like what millennials aspire to is that kind of like CEO who wears like a, $50,000 wristwatch and like wears all black and is cool and like wears sneakers with his suits. Like maybe not that's not that cool, because like the other thing I wanted to comment on before is that the right wing has become like a scold mill. Anyone has tattoos, anyone has and even like you were saying, like if you even have like outside belief and like this goes along with the dark web, we'll call it group chats. These are very real. If you've never experienced it, it is really real. You can be hot with people 1 minute, and then the next minute you will totally see the engagement fall off because you've said a bad word or you've talked to a bad person.
Yeah, it gets even more creepier. I will tell you that, my one friend Neurojack, I don't like Discord. Discord is obviously going the way of Slack, but I don't know if you heard of YT Combinator. It's by what's that guy? It's Sam Altman, whatever. They get a bunch of young kids. They put them in the Bay Area. When my Save Sleazy meme was blowing up, my friend Neurojack was screen capping their chat. He's in there as a spy, and they're basically saying how I'm a bad person, how this Joe Nally is evil and all that. And yet in my DMs, none of them will ever contact me like a tweet or anything. They know of our existence, but refuse to give us power. And this is from a big white collar corporation. And so this is what the gang stalkers and CIAs and the Indians are doing is that they don't want you to gain power and have the dialogue. And I wrote something about this a year or two ago about how, the new dehumanization is or was making sure you don't exist in dialogue, which is a part of the plan. But now I'm thinking it's this weird East German Stasi ideal to say negative shit to you until you just